It's day 20 of the war with Iran. The Israeli Air Force struck Iranian Navy assets on the Caspian Sea and hit more than 200 targets across western and central Iran, including the strategic South Par gas field. Iranian media report damage and halted production, with Tehran vowing retaliation across the Gulf. President Trump says Israeli strikes on gas infrastructure will not continue. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
Multiple explosions rocked the port city of Bandar Anzali as Israeli aircraft targeted naval vessels and escalation into Iran's northern theater. In separate waves, the IDF says it struck over 200 targets across western and central Iran in the past 24 hours, including missile and drone launch sites, air defense systems, and weapons production facilities. Military footage shows strikes on Iranian troops, part of what is described as a broad campaign to degrade Iran's military capabilities across multiple fronts. Israel also struck the South Pars natural gas field in Bushehr province, a strategic energy hub. Iranian media reported damage and temporary halts in production, while Tehran warned of retaliation across the Gulf. Global markets reacted immediately, with oil prices surging. The attack on Pars prompted this warning of retaliation from the Iranian military.
این هشدار قاطع و خط و نشان برای جنایتکارانی است که تعرض به بخشی از زیرساخت‌های سوخت و انرژی ایران در جنوب کشور داشتند. در نتیجه این اقدام زیرساخت‌های سوخت، انرژی و گاز مبدأ تهاجم در اولین فرصت در آتش می‌سوزد و به خاکستر تبدیل می‌شود.
Iran is already striking multiple Gulf states, including gas infrastructure. Qatar says that the fire at the major gas facility at Ras Laffan is now under control following the latest Iranian attack. After the latest strike on Qatar, President Trump said he will not allow further Israeli strikes on Iran's South Pars gas field. He claimed Israel violently lashed out, but only hit a small portion of the site. U.S. officials say the operation was coordinated with Washington. Trump warned any additional attacks on Qatar's energy facilities would prompt a massive U.S. response, striking Iran with strength and power.
Waves of IDF airstrikes continue across Lebanon as Israel targets Hezbollah leaders and infrastructure. Diplomatic pressure is mounting, with the U.S. urging Israel to consider talks before Lebanon collapses. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
The IDF struck in the Beirut area, eliminating Hassan Ali Marwan, commander of the Imam Hussein division, just a week after his predecessor was killed. Marwan had coordinated missile, UAV, and rocket attacks against Israel and IDF troops in southern Lebanon, and was the third commander eliminated since Operation Northern Arrows. In the past 24 hours, the 36th Division and Air Force have neutralized more than 20 Hezbollah terrorists and destroyed dozens of military structures in southern Lebanon. Golani Brigade combat teams foiled attempts to fire anti-tank missiles, eliminating 5 terrorists, while the Air Force struck 3 more. Soldiers also seized RPGs, anti-tank rockets, ammunition, and other weapons. The IDF says it will continue to act decisively against Hezbollah, which has joined the conflict under Iranian backing, and will not allow harm to Israeli civilians. After absorbing 20 days of intense rocket and mortar fire, Israeli farmers on the border remain resilient and hopeful that this war will be decisive.
First of all, I see movement of the army all the time, everywhere. There is a lot of army, a lot of units, a lot of special units, tanks all over. It's different because there is a much more army that you can see now than it was before. And most of the people that I'm talking to from the army, they promise that they hope that they will clean the area once and for all.
Amid the escalation, the U.S. and France are pushing to diplomatic efforts. The U.S. is pressuring Israel to prepare for talks with Lebanon, while France mediates a potential 3-month truce, leading to a non-aggression agreement. The conflict began March 2nd after Hezbollah fired on Israel in support of Tehran. Since then, Israeli strikes have killed over 900 people and displaced about 1 million in Lebanon.
Overnight, Iranian missile strikes using cluster munitions killed 4 people, including a foreign worker in central Israel and 3 Palestinians in the West Bank. In Moshav Adanim, a 30-year-old foreign worker was killed after being hit by shrapnel as multiple submunitions struck the area, indicating the use of a cluster warhead. First responders reported several impact sites across central Israel with damage to homes, but no additional fatalities. In a separate strike near Hebron, 3 Palestinians, 2 women and a teenage girl, were killed and more than a dozen others were wounded. They are the first reported Palestinian fatalities from Iranian attacks since the start of the war. Sirens sounded across central and southern Israel overnight as air defense systems responded to the barrage. Israeli officials say the use of cluster munitions marks a significant escalation, raising concerns over their wide area impact on civilian populations. And standing by with the latest on incoming rocket fire is ILTV's Alec Pollard. Alec?
Yes, Ivan, well, what we're seeing is an increase in the salvos that have been coming from Iran in the last few days. Everyone here has been in the shelter at least twice during the night, probably yourself as well. And those strikes, those munitions, cluster munitions that break apart in the sky to try to spread on a large area as possible, to cause damage to as many civilians as possible. But the impact is not as great. So maybe that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen any serious injuries in this latest salvo that we saw during this morning and during the night, as opposed to yesterday and the night before, which was serious. 2 people killed in Ramat Gan, a foreign worker who was killed, and also 3 Palestinians in Bet Awa near Hebron. They're not immune to these strikes themselves. So that is the situation over here. There is a bit of fatigue in the population with this war, this operation going on of running to shelter, but it seems like people are still adhering to the instructions, although the street here is pretty active at the moment. And it should also be noted that Hezbollah have increased their attacks and also their range, making their way all the way down to the southern border with some of those rocket attacks. Not to mention the north, that is under constant threat. And remember, in the north, they don't have that early warning system that we have here in the center from those rockets that are coming from Iran. So when it's coming from Iran from far away, you have that early alert time to go to the shelter, to find one if you're out in the street. In the north, they get the siren immediately, so it's a bit more threatening for them. So it's still a very problematic situation for the citizens of Israel. Luckily, though, in this update of what's been happening today, we haven't had any serious impacts. A couple sites in Tel Aviv that suffered minor damage from those shrapnels or from those munitions. So that is the situation here at the moment. Back to you, Sivan.
Thank you, Alec. And now joining me to discuss the latest in this war with Iran is former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren. Michael, thank you for joining.
Good to be with you, Sivan.
Likewise. We just heard by our correspondent in the field about the use of cluster bombs. They're used by Iran in strikes against Israel. They are illegal under international law. It's a war crime to use them. So I'm wondering where all the UN and human rights groups are. What are your thoughts?
It is a war crime to use cluster munitions. They have to be used in very specific circumstances. This is certainly under American law. Back in 2006, this is ancient history, what we now call the Second Lebanon War. We're into the third. Israel was using cluster weapons supplied by the United States of America. And the Bush administration, a very friendly administration, said that this was illegal. This was a violation of international law. And what Israel did then was to make its own cluster ammunition, which, according to the IDF, is actually better cluster ammunition. It is used for taking out entrenched positions. What it is, it's a bomb that breaks up into bomblets. Many of them are spherical, and they bounce and they go into trenches. Because if you're in a trench, it's very hard to get a soldier who's in a trench with a regular piece of a bomb that goes up like this. You need bombs that drop inside the trench. That's what cluster ammunition does, and it's very deadly. And one of the reasons it is very strictly circumscribed by international law is because many of these bomblets do not explode, and civilians, particularly children, after a battle will go and pick them up, and then they will explode. That is the major reason. So obviously then the use of these cluster munitions in these missiles, which are much, much bigger than the cluster munitions in artillery shells. Each one is the size of an artillery shell, and breaks. And there are, of course, many, many more of them in the Iranian missiles. Is patently, flagrantly, manifestly a violation of international law.
Now let's discuss Trump. He seems like he's all in until it's game over for the regime. Is game over even possible from the air only?
I think game over is possible. Depends on how long the campaign is sustained. You could sustain the campaign for weeks, months, perhaps even years. Does not have to be at this intensity. In fact, once most of the Iranian missile launchers are eliminated, the missile arsenals are destroyed, and Iran basically has no air defenses. There's no reason to keep up this level of military activity. What the campaign can do is then morph into a long-term blockade of Iran. Not a single drop of oil gets exported from Iran, and you begin to simply dry up the regime or what remains of it. And the model here is not the Iraq or Afghanistan war, which are wars with boots on the ground, trying at state making. You don't have to make Iran into a state; it actually is a state. But the real model here should be the Cold War, in which the United States and its allies remain very steadfast over the course not of years but of decades, and eventually brought down the Soviet bloc. But that's going to require some long-term planning, and on the American side, support from the American people.
Now, could we see a scenario where the United States moves toward an end of the war with Iran while Israel still has operational objectives? And if so, what happens then?
You cannot rule that out. Cannot rule that out. United States, our closest and dearest ally, at the end of the day, is far from the Middle East. Is not imminently threatened the way Israel is imminently threatened by Iran, and there's a political reality in the United States which is profoundly different than the political reality here, where our war is enjoying something like 93 to 95% support from the citizens. In the United States, it's a struggle. I read the American press every day, particularly the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. One really wonders on whose side these papers are. They seem to be rooting for the other side. There's a tremendous opposition here, even within the president's own party, but from economic sources, from foreign countries, from Europe, pressure. And so it would not be unrealistic to think that the president would seek what's called an off-ramp, but he has to be able to hang his victory on something. And what is that? What is it hung on? Maybe the reopening of the Hormuz Straits, maybe the reoccupation or occupation of Karg Island. One can think of various ways, but we're not there yet. And right now, with Iran closing the Hormuz Straits, with Iran seeming to having its handle on world energy prices, to end the war now, and I don't want to put too fine a point on this, Ivan, would be disastrous for the Middle East, but even disastrous to the world. The Chinese and the Russians will draw conclusions, and the world will certainly not look the same again.
Do you think that there's a realistic scenario where Israel would continue military action while the U.S. steps back, or are they at this point strategically locked together?
Well, maybe it's strategically locked together also because of the Iranians. The Iranians may not agree to a ceasefire if Israel continues up its campaign. The big question for us, I think, is going to be whether we can continue our campaign against Hezbollah. And I hope that the Prime Minister is in an intimate discussion with the President about this, because of course the two wars are indistinguishable. Hezbollah is a branch of Iran, and it is doing Iran's bidding by firing hundreds of rockets at Israel. But at the end of the day, Iran is far away, and there could be a ceasefire with Iran, but Hezbollah cannot be allowed to regroup and rearm in Lebanon for the very simple reason we will lose the northern part of this country. I'm very much involved with the north, and I'll tell you that people simply won't live there if they believe that Hezbollah remains a significant threat, and I can understand that fully. So for us, the fight against Hezbollah is something close to an existential fight. If we don't win it, we lose the north.
Former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Have a quiet day.
And despite nearly 3 weeks of war, a powerful message is emerging from Jerusalem. Jews around the world are still choosing Israel. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has more.
President Isaac Herzog visited the Jewish agency's Olpan Etzion Absorption Center in Jerusalem yesterday, meeting with new immigrants who have arrived even amid the ongoing conflict with Iran. According to the Jewish agency, more than 60,000 new immigrants have moved to Israel since October 7, 2023, a number that continues to grow despite security challenges. Standing inside the center, Herzog pointed to what he called a defining moment for the Jewish people, and said immigration to Israel is an expression of faith, hope, and the deep bond between the Jewish people and their state.
מי שעלה לפה צדק. מי שעלה לפה בזמן צדק. זה המקום להיות בו, זה המקום לבנות אותו ביחד.
The visit included a briefing on absorption efforts, language programs, and support systems designed to help newcomers integrate quickly into Israeli society. For many of the immigrants here, the decision to come was not delayed by war, but strengthened by it. Jewish Agency Chairman Doron Almog underscored that message directly.
אתם מנוע של תקווה, של עוצמה, אתם, כולכם.
At a time when Israel remains under threat on multiple fronts, officials say Aliyah is continuing to serve as both a demographic and symbolic boost. Herzog called it a direct response to Israel's enemies.
זה כוח אדיר, מטאפיזי, עצום, שמוביל עם שלם לחירות.
And for the families arriving now, the message is clear. Even in wartime, Israel remains not just a refuge, but a home.
Tonight in Israel, children are going to sleep with the sound of sirens, rockets, and uncertainty. Schools are closed, families have been evacuated from their homes, and many parents have been called away for reserve duty. For thousands of children, the trauma of war has become part of everyday life, unfortunately. But in the middle of the crisis, help is reaching them. For over 20 years, Shiloh Israel Children's Fund has been on the front lines of the emotional battle, bringing urgent trauma care to the children who need it most. Through its mobile therapy unit, trained trauma therapists travel directly to children in their homes and to hotels housing evacuated families. Instead of waiting for help, the help comes to them, providing immediate emotional support, stabilization, and care for children struggling with fear and trauma. These moments of care can mean the difference between lasting trauma and the beginning of healing. But this critical work depends on people who are willing to help. If you want to stand with Israel's children during this time of crisis, please donate today. Visit israelchildren.org/now, because every child deserves the chance to heal. Turning to Gaza, where the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt has reopened for the first time since Israel closed it on February 28th, the start of the war with Iran. The crossing is now open in both directions, allowing Palestinians, including medical patients, to return to Gaza. Ambulances were seen waiting for transport patients out of the strip. Long lines of fuel trucks have been waiting in Al Arish, Egypt, to bring fuel into Gaza for the first time since the start of the war with Iran. Israel's coordinator of government activities in the territory said the decision follows a security assessment to ensure operations can resume safely. Meanwhile, security operations are ongoing in Gaza. The IDF says it has demolished 5 kilometers of Hamas tunnels in Gaza over the past 2 weeks. One tunnel was in eastern Rafah, where dozens of Hamas gunmen had been holed up during the ceasefire, and another was in Han Yunis in southern Gaza. The normally bustling alleys and markets of Jerusalem's Old City are now largely empty as authorities restrict access amid the ongoing war with Iran, just days ahead of Eid al-Fitr, a major Islamic holiday that marks the end of Ramadan. Areas around the Al-Aqsa Mosque, normally packed during Ramadan, have been left deserted for weeks, with entry limited mainly to residents and heavy police presence on the ground. These measures follow recent missile fire, including debris from Iranian projectiles that fell near the walled compound earlier this week. Police say the restrictions are intended to prevent mass casualties in the Old City's narrow and crowded streets, where large gatherings could pose serious risks. Similar security measures have been implemented elsewhere, with roadblocks and movement limits across multiple areas. For many, the disruption has overshadowed Ramadan and Eid preparations, with traditions repeatedly interrupted by attacks from the Islamic regime in Tehran. The Old City of Jerusalem has not been spared, and for Israel, the most important thing is keeping all of its residents safe. As Israel continues to fight Iran, there is also a growing focus on what comes next and how the country will help its people recover from prolonged trauma and crisis. More from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
A new initiative from the Israel Innovation Authority and the Tecuma Directorate is investing approximately 5 million shekels to establish a first-of-its-kind national living lab in the southern city of Sderot. The lab will focus on human resilience, collecting long-term, real-world data on how people respond to stress, trauma, and uncertainty. That includes everything from sleep patterns and emotional responses to behavior and environmental conditions during emergencies. Officials say the goal is to turn years of hardship into actionable insight, building technologies that can better support individuals and communities during and after crises.
Wartime environments creates an urgent, well-funded demand for technologies that protect human performance. We are able, with R&D laboratories, to help both the people and the startups companies which are able to develop those services and to treat those people. The urgency accelerates adaptation, shortens sales cycles, and provides startups with access to defense budgets and multi-year contracts.
Sderot, which has lived under constant security threats for years, has been deeply impacted since October 7th. It offers a unique environment for this kind of research. The data collected there will create a large-scale, multi-dimensional repository that does not currently exist anywhere else in the world. That information will be used by startups, researchers, healthcare systems, and government agencies to develop new tools in areas like mental health, community resilience, and human-centered artificial intelligence. Beyond the research itself, the project is also expected to help rebuild the region, creating jobs in engineering, data, and AI, while attracting scientists and entrepreneurs back to southern Israel. Leaders behind the initiative say the vision is not just recovery, but transformation, turning one of the country's most challenged regions into a global hub for resilience research and innovation. At a time of ongoing war, Israel is not only defending itself, but also laying the groundwork for how its society heals and moves forward.
As the war rages on, uncertainty continues to plague Israelis as there is no clear indication as to when the war will be over. Here to give us an update on the flight situation is our ILTV correspondent, Devo Klein. Devo, what's the latest update on the flights?
Yes, Ivan, just coming on here real quick to give a brief update on the flight situation here in Israel. El Al, Israel's flagship carrier, have canceled their flights through to March 27th, their regularly scheduled flights. In addition, Israel have also canceled their flights through to March 31st. That means that many Israelis hoping to leave Israel for the Passover holiday coming up will likely not be able to do so. There are currently no alternatives, and we don't really know what's happening with international carriers. They have not resumed their flights, and we don't know when they will. El Al are, of course, offering reimbursements for those who have their flights canceled. These are the regularly scheduled flights. This is happening for a slew of reasons. The first being to make more room for these rescue flights and operations still ongoing, as many Israelis are still stranded abroad. And the second being the updated Home Front Command guidelines, as yesterday Ben Gurion Airport was the destination of an attack by the Islamic regime of ballistic missiles. 3 private jets were harmed in the missile barrage. No people were injured, but there was a lot of damage to the property, and the Home Front Command are now saying that it is unsafe in Ben Gurion Airport. That is all the updates we have, and we hope to have more for you soon.
Thank you, Devo. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast.